Copy.
You are looking live at Launch Pad 6, Site 31 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, where it is just a few minutes before sunrise at the Central Asian Desert Spaceport, and you're looking live at the Soyuz 2.1A booster, fully fueled, ready to launch just about 22.5 minutes from now to deliver 2.7 tons of food, fuel, and supplies to the crew members aboard the International Space Station. Good evening from Mission Control in Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room, as preparations are now complete in advance of the launch of the Progress 85 cargo ship, the unpiloted cargo ship that will be sent on its way for an 8-minute, 49-second launch for spacecraft separation from the upper stage, the third stage of the Soyuz booster, after which solar arrays and navigational antennas will deploy, and the Progress will begin the chase to catch up to the station for an automated docking on Thursday evening at 10:50 p.m. Central Time, 11:50 p.m. Eastern Time at the aft port of the Zvezda service module. As mentioned, the Progress is about to carry 2.7 tons of cargo to the international outpost that is currently occupied by 7 crew members. We'll talk about them in just a moment. Meanwhile, at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside of Moscow, Russian flight controllers are standing by for the liftoff of the Progress vehicle. Once the Progress separates from the upper stage of the Soyuz 2.1A booster, those flight controllers in Korolyov will take over control of the flight of the Progress on its 2-day journey to reach the International Space Station. At the time of launch, the International Space Station will be flying over Chad, over Central Africa, at an altitude of 260 statute miles. Here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center, the Orbit 3 team of flight controllers is on console, overseeing the systems of the International Space Station that will be the destination for the Progress 85 cargo ship. On console at this hour, presiding over this flight control team, is Flight Director Fiona Antkowiak. She is joined on console by Flight Director Heidi Brewer at this hour as they watch the countdown clocks ticking backwards, approaching the T-minus 20-minute mark before liftoff. As mentioned before, on board the International Space Station, the 7 crew members are about halfway through their sleep period. They will be awakened about 1 a.m. Central Time to begin their workday, which will include preparations for the arrival of the Progress craft on Thursday night. On board the International Space Station from left to right is NASA astronaut Frank Rubio, who is heading to a U.S. single-flight space record of 371 days in space at the time he arrives for his landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan on the Soyuz MS-24 spacecraft on September 27th. And again, from left to right is Dmitry Petelin, Sultan Al Niyati of the United Arab Emirates, NASA's Woody Hoburg, Steve Bowen. Then we have Andrei Fedyaev, the Russian cosmonaut, and on the far right is the Expedition 69 commander, Sergei Prokopyev. We're about to begin a very busy time for the International Space Station down at the Kennedy Space Center. Crew members are ready to lift off in the wee hours of Friday morning from Launch Pad 39A. That is the Crew 7 crew. From left to right, Roscosmos cosmonaut Konstantin Borisov, European Space Agency astronaut Andreas Mogensen, the commander of the Dragon Endurance that will lift off on Friday morning at 3:50 a.m. Eastern Time. That's Jasmine Mogbelli, the NASA commander of the Crew 7 crew, and on the far right, Satoshi Furukawa of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. Those 4 boarded Endurance in the wee hours of Tuesday morning for what is called a dry dress, basically a dress rehearsal of their countdown procedures. That was followed after they left the launch pad of a 6-second test firing, a static fire test of the Falcon 9, the SpaceX Falcon 9 engines, and everything checked out with flying colors. So the stage is set for their launch on Friday morning. That will come just about 4 hours after the scheduled docking of the Progress to the International Space Station, which will occur very late on Thursday night. Back on the launch pad, the countdown proceeding inside the 18-minute mark. Everything has checked out. The Soyuz booster was fueled by Russian technicians at the launch pad several hours ago. They are now in the final checks of the Soyuz systems, awaiting the final minutes of the liftoff, before liftoff, that will send the Progress on its way. The timeline from launch through ascent will call for the first stage separation and the jettisoning of the solids that flank the first stage of the Soyuz booster at the 1 minute 58 second mark into the flight. At 3 minutes and 3 seconds into the flight, the launch shroud that is covering, that's that green triangular section in the upper portion of the Soyuz booster, that will be jettisoned 3 minutes and 3 seconds into the flight. Second stage shutdown of the Soyuz engines will occur 4 minutes and 37 seconds into the flight. 10 seconds later, the second stage will separate, and the third stage will have ignited on the final phase of the climb to orbit. Third stage shutdown is scheduled at 8 minutes and 46 seconds into the flight. 3 seconds later, the Progress will separate from the third stage, and moments later, its solar arrays and navigational antennas will be unfurled as the Progress begins its chase to catch up to the International Space Station. The launch time tonight is 8:08 and 10 seconds p.m. Central Time, 9:08 and 10 seconds p.m. Eastern Time, which is 6:08 a.m. Baikonur time on Wednesday morning at the Cosmodrome in the Central Asian Desert. We are less than 16 minutes away from the launch of the Soyuz booster with the Progress resupply craft. At about the T-minus 7 minute mark, a launch key will be inserted in the launch bunker at Baikonur, transitioning the launch sequence into an automated mode. The launch control team will report that the range is clear and the Soyuz rocket is ready to begin its journey. The pressurization of the first stage of the Soyuz booster is scheduled at about the T-minus 2 minute 45 second mark in the count, followed about 1 minute and 15 seconds later by the termination of the ground propellant feed to the Soyuz rocket. At the T-minus 1 minute mark, the Soyuz will go on internal power, and then the first of the two umbilicals, the towers that are buttressed up against the upper stage of the rocket, will begin to retract. The first umbilical is scheduled to retract at about the T-minus 30 second mark, followed about 18 seconds later by the retraction of the second booster that will initiate the auto sequence start for main engine start. You're looking right there at the upper stage of the Soyuz 2.1A booster. Again, a 3-stage rocket that will send the Progress on an 8 minute, 49 second journey to its preliminary orbit. There will be a series of rendezvous maneuvers over the next 2 days to raise the orbit of the Progress to match that of the International Space Station, and of course to place it in the terminal phase of its rendezvous during the early evening hours on Thursday night. Once again, docking to the aft port of the Zvezda service module is scheduled at 10:50 p.m. Central Time Thursday night, 11:50 p.m. Eastern Time, just about 4 hours before the launch of the Falcon 9 SpaceX rocket from Launch Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center with the Crew 7 crew on board. The Soyuz booster with the Progress 85 cargo craft rolled out to the launch pad on Site 31 there in Baikonur on Sunday. It was raised vertically, where technicians then began to hook up fuel lines and electrical lines to the rocket for final pre-launch checks prior to the start of the fueling of the rocket, which occurred several hours ago. The skies are clear in Baikonur. The temperature a balmy 70 degrees on this summer night or early morning hours on Wednesday morning in Baikonur. Again, the Soyuz booster fully fueled, ready to begin its journey as the countdown clock ticks backwards to the T-minus 12.5-minute mark. Once the Progress automatically docks to the International Space Station's Zvezda module on Thursday evening, there'll be a few minutes to allow the relative motion of the two vehicles to dampen out against one another before the forward docking probe is retracted on the Progress cargo craft, enabling the closing of the hooks to form a hard mate. The cosmonauts on board the International Space Station, Prokopyev, Petelin, Fedyaev, will conduct leak checks on the station side of the docking interface before they open up the hatch to the Progress to begin unloading its cargo. Again, the Progress is loaded with 2.7 tons of food, fuel, and supplies for the Expedition 69 crew, kicking off an extremely busy time frame that will also see the launch of the Crew 7 crew from the Kennedy Space Center in the overnight hours on Friday morning. That will be followed by the scheduled undocking of the Crew 6 crew, Steve Bowen, Woody Hoberg, Sultan Al-Niyati, and Andrei Fedyaev, on September 1st to complete their 6 months on board the International Space Station. You see the two large gantry arms on either side of the Soyuz 2.1A booster. They retracted about an hour or so ago to expose the rocket for the first time. And again, the two umbilical towers that are buttressed up against the side of the Soyuz vehicle will begin to retract in sequence, the first at about the T-minus 30-second mark, the second at about the T-minus 12-second mark. That will initiate the auto sequence for engine start. The engines will come up to intermediate power and then to full throttle before the hold down arms swing backward to enable the Soyuz to begin its journey to deliver the Progress to its preliminary orbit. T-minus 9 minutes, 30 seconds until launch. The launch will occur again at 8:08 and 10 seconds p.m. Central Time, 9:08 and 10 seconds p.m. Eastern Time, where it is in Baikonur, 6:08 in the morning at launch time. About 12 or so minutes after sunrise, you can see the glow of the sun rising to the east. The Soyuz booster will arc out to the northeast, heading for an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator.
Доклад 30-го принял, первый.
The path was cleared for the launch of the Progress 85 cargo craft to the space station, with the departure on Sunday night of the older Progress, the ISS 83 cargo ship that undocked from the aft port of the service module. It was deorbited and burned up harmlessly in the Earth's atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean. Still at the station is the ISS Progress 84 cargo craft.
Минутную готовность принял 50-й. Минутную готовность принял 60-й. Минутную готовность принял 60-й. Доклады руководителя работ принял, первый. Первый, есть готовность системы измерений 70-й. Доклад 70-го принял, первый. 60-му сбросить ШО объекта, первый. Есть сбросить ШО объекта 60-й.
Inside 7 minutes to launch. The ground launch sequencer has been initiated for the final minutes of the countdown.
Есть готовность систем комплекса 30-й. Доклад 30-го принял, первый. Первый. Сброс ШАО объекта проведен. Замечаний нет. Космический аппарат к запуску готов. 60-й. Доклад 60-го принял, первый.
That conversation you're hearing is emanating from the launch bunker, the blockhouse at Baikonur, by launch controllers as they tick off the various milestones leading to the final 6 minutes before liftoff. T-minus 5.5 minutes until liftoff. Everything in order. All of the Soyuz booster systems in good shape. The Progress soon to begin its journey of 2 days to the International Space Station. T-minus 5 minutes and counting. About a minute from now, the fuel lines and other elements of the rocket engines will be purged with nitrogen that fireproofs them by removing vapors of fuel and oxidizer from the base of the rocket.
Доклады руководителя работ принял, первый.
The International Space Station about to fly over Central Africa on this orbit of the Earth. The 7 crew members on board are asleep at this hour as we reach the T-minus 4 minute mark in the countdown. Strip chart recorders in the Launch Control Center now activated to provide telemetry to the blockhouse. The glow of dawn bathing the Soyuz 2.1A rocket as we approach the 3 minute mark in the countdown.
дренаж 30. Есть дренаж 70.
The key to drainage command has been given. This enables valves through which evaporated or gaseous oxygen escapes from the fuel tanks into the atmosphere. It enables excess fuel to drain back into the tanks, the valves providing liquid oxygen to replenish that which has been lost over the past couple of hours by evaporation. Coming up on the 2-minute mark, the fuel and oxidizer tanks now being pressurized, optimizing fuel flow to provide structural rigidity to the launch vehicle. T-minus 2 minutes and counting. Shortly, we'll see the first of the two umbilicals buttressed up against the side of the Soyuz 2.1A booster retracting. Coming up on the T-minus 1 minute mark. T-minus 50 seconds. The first umbilical tower now retracting. The second umbilical retracting, initiating engine sequence start. We have engine sequence start. Engines coming up to full throttle. And liftoff. Liftoff of the 85th Progress resupply mission to the International Space Station. Tower is clear. All engines at full thrust. The Soyuz arcing out to the northeast from the Central Asian desert. All first stage engines operating normally according to the reports from the blockhouse at Baikonur. Structural parameters are normal. The vehicle is stable in the early stages of its flight. Coming up on the 1 minute mark into the flight. Engine thrust is normal. Good performance so far from the first stage. Roll, pitch, and yaw, all the parameters reported to be normal from the blockhouse. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. About 28 seconds until first stage shutdown and separation. Good first stage performance. Good structural rigidity and parameters from the blockhouse in Baikonur. All good reports coming back from Baikonur as we stand by for first stage separation. Third stage separation confirmed. 2 minutes, 12 seconds into the flight. The second stage engines are now carrying the Progress further and further towards its preliminary orbit. 6.5 minutes of powered flight remaining. Structural parameters all reported to be normal on second stage performance. Liftoff occurring on time at 8:08 and 10 seconds p.m. Central Time. Good control of the vehicle, good structural parameters, good engine performance all reported. The vehicle is very stable in flight according to the blockhouse. We have passed the 3-minute mark into the flight, about 90 seconds away from second stage shutdown. We've had the jettisoning of the launch shroud over the Progress vehicle. Coming up on the 3.5-minute mark into the flight, everything is going by the book. All structural parameters and engine performance reported to be normal.
6 часов, 8 минут, 10 секунд, 412 миллисекунд.
Approaching the 4-minute mark into the flight. And the view now from a camera on the upper stage of the Soyuz 2.1A booster. Second stage performance is normal. About 20 seconds or so away from second stage shutdown and separation.
Параметры системы управления ракетой-носителя в норме.
4 minutes, 40 seconds into the flight. We're standing by for second stage shutdown and separation.
Прошел гарантийный наддув бака окислителя третьей ступени. 290. Есть запуск двигателя третьей ступени. Есть выключение двигателя второй ступени. Есть отделение второй ступени. 300.
There's the skirt jettisoning of the third stage.
310. Стабилизация изделия устойчивая.
Third stage engine up and running.
320.
Coming up on the 5.5-minute mark into the flight. We have about 3.5 minutes of powered flight remaining.
330. Двигатель третьей ступени работает нормально.
The third stage engine performing as advertised. Good stability on the spacecraft, the Soyuz 2.1A booster in the final phase of its launch to send the Progress 85 into its preliminary orbit. Six minutes into the flight. All reports coming back from Baikonur report good performance by the Soyuz.
370. Параметры конструкции ракеты-носителя в норме. 380. Двигатель третьей ступени работает нормально.
6.5 minutes into the flight, about 2.5 minutes to go in powered flight. The third stage engine continues to perform in a normal fashion.
400. Стабилизация изделия устойчивая.
The vehicle remains very stable on a pinpoint path to its preliminary orbit. 7 minutes into the flight, about 1 minute and 46 seconds remaining of powered flight.
норме. 430. Двигатель третьей ступени работает нормально.
The third stage engine continues to do its job as we approach the 7.5 minute mark into the flight.
Полет нормальный.
7 minutes, 40 seconds into the flight, just over 1 minute of powered flight remaining.
Ракеты и носителя в норме. 470. Двигатель третьей ступени работает нормально.
We've now passed the 8 minute mark into the flight, less than a minute of powered flight remaining.
480. Параметры системы управления в норме. 490. Стабилизация изделия устойчивая.
Coming up on the 8.5 minute mark into the flight, good stability on the vehicle. Just a few seconds away from third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation.
Вращение в норме. 520. Параметры системы управления.
Third stage separation confirmed. Preliminary orbit standing by for the unfurling of the solar arrays, and there they go. And we now have confirmation that the solar arrays and the navigational antennas have all deployed as planned. A flawless climb to orbit for the Progress 85 cargo craft, now beginning its two-day chase to catch up to the International Space Station for a docking on Thursday evening. And the TV camera on the Progress has now been activated. You can see that familiar engineering cross-haired view. It was a perfect launch into a sunrise at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, with an 8-minute, 49-second ride to orbit on the Soyuz 2.1A booster, delivering the Progress 85 into its preliminary orbit to begin a two-day 34-orbit chase to arrive at the International Space Station Thursday night for an automated docking to the aft port of the Zvezda service module, docking scheduled at 10:50 p.m. Central Time, 11:50 p.m. Eastern Time, just 4 hours before the scheduled launch of the Crew 7 crew to the International Space Station from Launch Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. The Progress was beginning a planned attitude maneuver, an orientation maneuver. And back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, the flight controllers will work with their Russian counterparts at the Russian Mission Control Center over the next 2 days to monitor all of the systems on the Progress and its path to the International Space Station. So with that, that'll wrap up our launch coverage for this evening with one programming note. Thursday night, we'll be back on the air at 10 p.m. Central Time, 11 p.m. Eastern Time on the media channel only, with our rendezvous and docking coverage for Progress 85. That will clear the decks on the public channel for the start of Crew 7 launch coverage, with the suit up of the Crew 7 crew from their crew quarters at the Kennedy Space Center. That coverage on the public channel will begin at 10:45 p.m. Central Time, 11:45 p.m. Eastern Time. So a double header for you on Thursday night into the wee hours of Friday morning. Our rendezvous and docking coverage for Progress 85 again on the media channel only, beginning Thursday night at 10 p.m. Central Time, 11 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you then. For now, this is Mission Control Houston.